Welcome to the Doors Open Guelph virtual walking tour of downtown Guelph's Douglas Street. I wish we could explore it together live on the street, but I am grateful that the Guelph Arts Council is providing you with the opportunity to enjoy from your home some of the city's interesting sights, including one of my favorite downtown locations. The City of Guelph has given a heritage designation to several Douglas Street buildings, while others have been classified as of historical significance in an attempt to preserve the character, history, and the old world charm of the street. Before we start our tour of the buildings, I'd like to take you back to the street's earliest beginnings. Douglas is a short street with a long history, although in Guelph's early days it did not exist. A town plan dated 1827 shows the distinct shape of St. George's Square with a triangular block of land directly north of it, but Douglas Street is not in sight. By 1847, the narrow street of Douglas appears on the plan of the town, and a map of 1855 shows the still unnamed street running off the square. Could this be the map that is behind the legend that Guelph's founder, John Galt, mixed up the surveys of Guelph and Goderich? Douglas Street was originally a dirt road with a wooden board sidewalk, and the street was first paved in 1908. Ross Irwin's Origin of Street Names says that the street was named after a 19th century Guelph pioneer brewer, Jonathan Douglas, who was one of the first people to live in this area. Under bylaw number 55, Douglas Street received its name effective January 1st, 1856. Inconsistently, for the next 50 years, the spelling went back and forth with the use of one and two S's. Gordon Couling, in his Downtown Walkabout, comments on this shortcut to Woolwich Street with the following words: Douglas Street provides an unexpected contrast to the spaciousness of Wyndham Street. The limited width is due to the fact that the street was not on the original town survey, but was opened to Woolwich Street about 1845 to improve access to the district, now county, courthouse. For more than 100 years, this narrow street became the preferred office location for many Guelph barristers and solicitors due to the proximity of the courthouse, the county solicitor's building, the registry office, the office of the Crown Attorney, and the jail. In 1960, then local historian Russell Daly reported that the street houses the offices of 20 of Guelph's lawyers of the 26. Hence, some locals fondly referred to the street as Legal Lane, Legal Row, or Legal Alley. To other Guelph residents, the nickname Little Wall Street seemed more appropriate. An explanation for this nickname appeared in a 1962 newspaper editorial saying, "It was intended to be a compliment and a suggestion that considerable wealth lurked behind the not very artistic facades of the old buildings." This seems like a harsh criticism, yet another editorial in the same newspaper just 10 months prior is quoted as saying, "From aesthetic viewpoint, Douglas Street as a whole may leave much to be desired. However, it is perhaps downtown Guelph's last link with the past." It is perhaps this link that artists want to capture on canvas. The vista of the street leading to St. George's Church has been the subject of many artists. A streetscape painted by William Fowler Wells hangs in the legal office of Miller Thompson, and Olga Ruth Ingle adorns the main office in St. George's Church, and Marlene Joffriette's version of the pretty vista hangs within the walls of 20 Douglas. Artist Evan MacDonald, who through his paintings documented the demolition of Guelph's iconic buildings such as the Guelph Opera House, the old Carnegie Library, and the Post Office Customs House, also painted the Douglas Street view. Other interpretations of the street have been painted by Christopher Cape, Alex Krajewski, and Lillian Rosendahl, to name a few. The picturesque street, so reminiscent of days gone by, has also been the site of TV and movie shoots. Camera crews from Murdoch Mysteries were at work on Douglas in both 2013 and 15, Carriages and Model Ts didn't look out of place on this narrow street, but during filming, cars went against the grain of the current one-way sign, allowing St. George's Church to be seen through the eye of the camera. Actor Natasha Richardson walked this street during the filming of Haven in 2001. Parking meters were temporarily removed in order to convert the street to Second World War Germany. Douglas Street's buildings were adorned with Nazi flags and banners, which caused quite a stir when they were also seen hanging from St. Agnes School in the Basilica of Our Lady parking lot. In 2005, a Christmas chick flick, Christmas in Boston, was filmed in Guelph, with many identifiable scenes shot on Douglas. The tiny laneway beside the Red Brick Café was transformed into a Christmas tree sales lot, and a full moon shone over the steeple of St. George's. St. George's Square and Market Square were the original commerce districts of early Guelph, while the establishments on Douglas have, for the most part, always been more service-oriented. By the early 1880s, the corridor had become a bustling center of activity, and through the years, a long list of services, almost inclusive from A to Z, could be found here. Over the past 174 years, you could find artists, accountants, and architects, barristers, barbers, and bakers, a chiropractor and consulate offices, doctors, dentists, dance instruction, and a dressmaker, engineers, financial services, fitness instruction, the Guelph Chamber of Commerce, hair and beauty parlors, insurance companies and insurance agents, a jeweler, services provided by a livery and a masseuse, opticians and osteopaths, a public stenographer, realtors and restaurants, stockbrokers, shoe shiners and surveyors, typewriter suppliers, undertakers, veterinary associations, and a wig boutique. Let's stroll down the street now, taking a closer look at each building as we pass by. The original Brownlow block, built from locally quarried limestone, originally was numbered 1 through 7. The building's namesake, William Brownlow, was a carpenter and undertaker, two jobs that often went hand in hand. In the 1860s, Brownlow worked alongside one of the Tuvell brothers in an undertaking business behind the old Wellington Hotel, where the Red Brick Café now stands. Brownlow purchased the lot across from that shop in 1872, and the Mercury Progress Report of December 1872 tells us, "Those who have charge of the Brownlow estate are now completing the large 3-story building on Douglas Street, which when finished will be fitted up for offices." The use of the phrase Brownlow estate is somewhat confusing. Mr. Brownlow was living at the time of construction and did not die until many years later in 1908. However, just 3 months after the newspaper's report on the building's status, the tax assessment roll of 1873 no longer lists Brownlow as the property owner. Perhaps poor health or financial difficulties was the reason that another party was looking after his business affairs. At the same time, his undertaking advertisements disappeared from the newspapers. The building was known as the Brownlow Block for the next 40 years, despite the fact that he owned it for approximately just 1 year. The exact date of the building's opening is not known, but lawyers Andrew Lemon and Henry Peterson were one of the first tenants in the Brownlow Block offices, and their firm was a regular advertiser in the Guelph Evening Mercury. On March 21st, 1873, their ad indicates they are located in an office above the Bank of Commerce. And on the following day, March 22nd, an address change is noted as being in the new Brownlow building near the registry office. Between 1873 and 1905, ownership changed hands a few times. Gertrude Gummer and the Day family owned the building in 1905, and by 1914, Gertrude's father, Harry, and her brother Bertram are listed as the owners. The Gummer Press, publishers of the Guelph Herald, moved from their Quebec Street location, which was just around the corner behind what is now CIBC, and from that point onwards, the Brownlow Block has been known as the Gummer Building. The fourth floor was added sometime around 1910. A new sign has recently been hung over the building's front door, and Harry Gummer's image has been given the spotlight on the side of the sign facing away from the square. Far from today's rates, in 1900 the subscription cost of the Daily Herald was $4 per annum and just $1.50 per annum for the weekly edition. Gummer remained proprietor of the Herald until January 3, 1924, and then sold his newspaper business to his rival, the Guelph Evening Mercury. It has been said that the records of the Herald were sold to a junkman, who in turn sold the newspapers for scrap paper. Over the years, the offices of this now designated building have been used by a variety of tenants, including Bell Telephone. Their switchboard and offices were here from 1883 to approximately 1903. Interestingly, Charles Raymond of Raymond Sewing Machines was the first phone subscriber in Guelph at a cost of 80 cents per month, and the phone directory of 1883 listed exactly 50 subscribers, only 9 of which were residential lines. Many lawyers, accountants, and insurance agents carried on business activities within these offices. A previous tenant from the early 2000s recalls some of the building's features. She remembers that the floor in her office was so slanted my wheeled office chair kept rolling to the other end of the room, but I always felt completely snug in my fourth floor garret with high ceilings, wood sash windows, and oak floors. Although its Victorian-era steam radiators hulked and hissed, they produced little heat, so fingerless gloves, space heaters, and hot drinks were my source of extra comfort. Many of the offices still bore the old-fashioned, heavy, varnished oak doors with stippled glass, and gold stenciled lettering across the glass identified the blurred beyond. Although it had a rather grand staircase, the building also had a vintage elevator and an equally vintage black and white lit sign with the single word elevator suspended out from the wall beside the elevator, since it was otherwise not visible from the lobby. It was the kind of elevator with a cage door that is pulled across before the main door closes, ergo the need for a trained elevator operator. The fact that it closed with a safety hook that looked suspiciously like a bent coat hanger seemed of no import. The last elevator man and his daughter had a passion for photography, and their darkroom was in the basement. Some of their photos featuring details of the architecture and fittings of the building hung along the main hall leading to the elevator. Other local photographers, like Dean Palmer, have captured the pre-fire interior charm of the Gummer. Trina Coster's camera caught an elevator operator in the original wooden shaft elevator, which was one of the oldest remaining functioning attendant-operated elevators in Ontario. Easter weekend of 2007, 40 firefighters battled flames as they valiantly worked to save 3 historic structures, the Gummer Building and the neighboring Stewart Building and the Victoria Hotel. 23 businesses and individuals were renting space at the time. The fire's devastation included the loss of the building's renowned manually operated elevator. The Gummer narrowly escaped extinction. Only the exterior walls of the building remained intact after the fire. The building graces the downtown today because concerned citizens, a city, and a local developer, Skyline, were collectively motivated to preserve and revitalize the fabric of Guelph's downtown core. The beautifully restored 77,000 square foot building houses offices, retailers, a restaurant, and 18 apartments. Salvageable stone and wood were reused during renovations, saving tons of landfill waste, at the same time preserving the historical significance of the original structure. The brass elevator handle and light were to have been either donated to the museum or put on display in the restored Gummer, but unfortunately disappeared during the cleanup after the fire. Skyline's new Gummer, which is now numbered number 5 Douglas, is an eco-sensitive building, and as a participant in the Green Roof project, had perennial sedums planted on the rooftop in 2013. Its rooftop covering attracts birds and bees and is essentially maintenance-free. Skyline was the recipient of the Gordon Couling Heritage Award for their restoration of this downtown landmark. From caskets to cakes, the limestone and pale yellow brick structure that is number 9 has seen little change structurally and has had a variety of uses since its construction in 1878. A fire insurance plan that predates the construction indicates that a structure noted as number 9 existed further back on the property and that coffin manufacturing was its purpose. The property then was owned by undertaker James Tuvell. After the death of James, his son Nathan established a partnership with undertaker and brother-in-law John Mitchell, and together they operated a business at the corner of Quebec and Wyndham Streets, now the CIBC. Mitchell moved to this Douglas Street location. Tuvell set up his own funeral business on Quebec Street, and in 1906, Mitchell's son Austin eventually took over business operations. I could not determine if this building was merely a showroom and wareroom of funereal supplies, or if embalming ever took place within its walls, but A.M. Mitchell is quoted in the Royal City booklet of 1907 as being an experienced embalmer and funeral director, and an invoice from John Mitchell dated March 18, 1897, adds the notation undertaker and embalmer under Mr. Mitchell's name. In 1951, the sign outside the shop changed to Augie's Shoe Shine, and at that time a barber conducted business in the back of the shop with hat repairs available in the basement. A matchbook cover from Augie's is in the Guelph Civic Museum's collection and lists the services provided inside his shop. A wig boutique opened in 1967, and this bright green facade lasted a short time under the tenancy of Carmen de Corso. Dorothy Watson took over the big wig business, adding a hairstyling salon with aesthetic services available in the rented basement. I spoke with one of these estheticians recently, and she wanted me to know about the inexplicable noises that were heard above during shop hours. After hearing such a noise, they would investigate the upper level, only to find nothing or no one that could explain the sounds. One day, the owner of the salon was doing some calculations on the cash register when the number 666 appeared on the display. For a few moments, no other numbers were operable. Haunted or coincidental? These women were convinced the first adjective was most likely. Beauty products on the shelves were replaced with books when the Alibaba Bookshop opened in 1993. Then in 2001, the building was home to the pottery shop You're Fired, followed by a women's clothing store, Stell. While relatively intact, this building was affected by the Dunbar Building fire of 2007. A new roof was needed and the interior suffered from water, mold, and smoke damage. Current owner Anne Forrestal moved in with her business, Wellington Cakes, in 2012. Anne's roots in Guelph date back to 1827. Her great-great-great-grandfather, Felix Hanlon, is listed as one of Guelph's first-year settlers. The sign that often sits outside her shop reads, "Best butter tarts in Guelph," according to our dads. In the empty lot at number 11 stood the 2-story terracotta brick home of John Mitchell, whose business we just visited next door. The home was built in 1892 and remained in the family until 1964. The house became vacant and was demolished in 1967, at which time the property became a parking lot for the Bank of Nova Scotia. Skyline tenant parking signs are currently posted in the lot, but ownership belongs to Mason Realty. The second oldest building on the street is number 15. In 1862, the law firm of Ferguson, Kingsmill, and Guthrie acted as county solicitors, and John Jukero Kingsmill was also acting as county crown attorney. In December of that year, County Council received a request from Kingsmill that he be allowed to erect an office adjacent to the courthouse and jail. The county released the vacant lot to Kingsmill with the stipulation that he erect a good and sufficient edifice thereon, 2 stories high with a fireproof roof adapted for the purpose of a crown attorney's office, at a cost of not less than $1,200, at a rent of 1 shilling per annum so long as it is used as a Crown Attorney's office, but charging a rent of $100 per annum in the event that it is no longer used for that purpose. This limestone building with a construction date of 1863 to 65 is the result of that clause. Just a few years later, in 1869, Adam Johnson Ferguson proposed to sell the building or purchase the land upon which it stood. The county decided to buy the building and has remained in the possession of it for the past 150 years. The long list of successors to the original law firm of Ferguson, Kingsmill and Guthrie occupied these offices and filled the duties of county solicitor for an Ontario record of more than a century. Number 15 was designated in 1980, at which time renovations took place, including repointing and cleaning of chimneys and stones and the removal of Virginia creeper that adorned the exterior walls. Beyond the front door, ornate tin ceilings, arched doorways, and fireplaces speak of years gone by. The building has seen some interior renovations to accommodate modern offices and still belongs to the County of Wellington. The second floor offices were originally occupied by the local master of the Supreme Court, and other offices were rented out to a number of varied tenants. In the 1960s, it was home to the Guelph detachment of the OPP. The Children's Early Years Division of the county currently holds offices in this building. Taking a few more steps up the street, we find number 21, the location for many years of the registry office. The original registry office was built in 1847 on this site and stood forward on the property just steps away from the sidewalk. The new building was built in 1953 behind the existing office, and once completed, the old registry office was torn down. The cairn on the front lawn has been made of stones from the original structure. Today, the County of Wellington's IT department runs out of this office space. Interestingly, a 1920s fire insurance plan indicates the existence of a bowling green in the back of the building. The structure at number 2527 was built in 1885 and was designed by John Hall, who was the architect of many homes and commercial buildings in Guelph, including Guelph Collegiate Vocational Institute and the two schools, St. Agnes and St. Stanislaus, on opposite sides of the parking lot at the Basilica of Our Lady. Coincidentally, Mr. Hall rented office space on the second floor at number 15. Made of pale yellow brick and limestone, it was built as an office for the Crown Attorney and was used for that purpose until 1967. Many unique details can be found upon a closer inspection. The patterned slate roof is original, and an embossed owl sits perched on the keystone of an upper window, a most appropriately chosen image. In Greek mythology, an owl sat on the blind side of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy, so that she could see the whole truth. The indented 15-panel corner doorway is one of the items included in the protected features when the building was designated in 1980. This building is still owned by County of Wellington and sadly is currently used as storage. Let's walk down the laneway beside the building to take a peek in behind. Here stands the Governor's House and former jail, both erected in 1911 and designed by William A. Mahoney, the architect of many of Ontario's Carnegie libraries, excluding Guelph. Mr. Mahoney was also a tenant on Douglas Street, occupying an office in number 20. These buildings are built with stone that was salvaged from the original octagonal jail that stood in this same spot in 1839. The 1839 jail was the first permanent public building in town, and James Lindsay has the distinction of being the first person confined within it. His crime? Stealing cattle. Unfortunately, his 5-year imprisonment did not curb his criminal tendencies, as after only 6 weeks of freedom, Mr. Lindsay was arrested near Toronto on similar charges and subsequently served another 7 years in the provincial penitentiary. This site was the location of 6 public hangings between 1847 and 1919. A stone-walled exercise yard was part of the design of the original 1839 jail, and a portion of that wall was incorporated into the 1911 redesign and remains here today. These 2 structures, Governor's House and the jail, were given designated status in 1983. The 1839 jail's identical twin building still stands in Goderich and serves as a museum. Let's return to the street. At the beginning of the 20th century, number 29, right next to the Crown Attorney's building, was first housed a medical office before becoming a barber shop for the next approximate 35 years. This was in the days of a 25-cent haircut and when 15 cents would get you a shave. As the title of this project presentation suggests, clips could be found on this street by a number of barbers and hairdressers of the time. William Thorvis Law Office was the last tenant here before the building was demolished in 1966. An 1894 city directory indicates that Harry Gummer, proprietor of the Herald, lived at number 33. Dr. Lindsay's and Dr. McCarter's medical practices and A. Dignan & Sons undertaking businesses were situated at this end of the street, as well as apartments for rent. The brick structure was apparently the first building in Guelph in which electric service was installed during construction. After demolition in 1973, the property became a parking lot. Before crossing the street, let's stop and admire the focal point of the Douglas Street vista, St. George's Church. As Gordon Couling points out in his walking tour guidebook, the street also provides an impressive frame for the vista to St. George's Anglican Church. When the church was built, its tower was aligned directly with the center of Douglas Street. This pretty limestone church with the multicolored slate roof was completed in 1873 at a recorded cost of $25,998.60. 135 years later, the slate roof was replaced at a cost of $500,000. The architect strategically placed the church's tower to line up with the center of Douglas Street, connecting this church to the church's original location in the center of St. George's Square. As we cross over to the other side of the street, it's interesting to know that when the only traffic on the street was horse and carriage, traffic flowed in both directions. The arrival of the automobile necessitated the change to a one-way street. In the 1930s, cars were angle parked. A lovely home with an actual address of Woolwich Street stood as the anchor to Douglas on the corner of Douglas and Woolwich, which too is now a parking lot. This site was home of George Oxnard, father-in-law of lawyer Charles Lawrence Dunbar, who constructed number 32 Douglas as offices for his law practice. The building is another example of architecture designed by William A. Mahoney, and with a construction date of 1918 is the newest building on the street. Angus Dunbar joined his father's firm in 1923 and practiced law on the first floor for 60 years. Since 1984, Mason Realty has owned and occupied the building, which for decades was known as the Dunbar Building. The interior has been virtually untouched and boasts the original fireplace, wood doors, and trim. The only modifications have been the removal of a main floor powder room in the front office and the widening of the basement stairs. The door on the left side of the building, number 30, is the entrance door and stairway to the upper offices of number 32. A variety of tenants have occupied the upper floor, including dentist Dr. Douglas M. Foster. Imagine the sound of horses' hooves of yesteryear as we move to number 2628. Its beginnings date back to a time that predates today's parking lot. A livery provided stabling in addition to hiring out a horse and carriage. 1878 was the year of construction, built by George Patterson at a cost of $1,500. The livery saw a succession of owners over a period of more than 50 years, and in that time the signage on the building's exterior changed from Patterson's livery, McConnell and Patterson, Arch McLean's livery, Douglas Street livery owned by Mr. Johnson, then P. Sprague, C.L. Kearns Taxi and Auto livery, and finally in 1925 became Kearns Garage. In the Royal City Booklet of 1907, this livery is described as a business that kept on hand the newest and most up-to-date turnouts, tally-hos, rubber-tired runabouts, comfortable rubber-tired hacks and browns, well-groomed horses, reliable drivers, and a telephone that never sleeps. Teams are hooked to hacks on the floor, always ready to answer calls at a moment's notice. The fire insurance plan of 1929 indicates the building was undergoing renovations, with the notation that it was to become a furniture store. Again, ownership of the furniture and household appliance store changed hands a few times. First owner, Fred J. Armstrong, sold the business to Stanley Cook, who changed the name to Pioneer Furniture. Coincidentally, Stanley's brother owned Pioneer Farm Equipment on Waterloo Avenue, where now the Pioneer Apartments stand. Mr. Cook sold to Doug Florence in 1967, and after Doug's retirement, his sons ran the business at both this and the Highway 24 location until 2011. Brian Florence recalls a memory from his childhood of riding brand new bicycles in the basement of the home furnishings shop. In addition to furniture, the store offered everything from toasters to bicycles. Currently in the rear of number 28, where the horse stables for the livery once existed, 3 artists have made their studio space very warm and inviting. Laurie McGaw, whose work is depicted on 35 Royal Canadian Mint coins, is on the main floor, sharing space with fiber artist Sheila Thompson. Helen Hoy is above in what would have been the hayloft. The exposed brick walls provide the backdrop for their artwork. Interesting features of the building include the carved trough in the concrete floor, which at one time would have allowed horse urine to flow out of the barn. The support system in place eliminated the need to build support posts in the center of the room. Both Laurie and Helen are annual participants in Guelph's Fall studio tour, and Sheila just moved to the street recently. Renovations have recently restored the facade beautifully to its original arched windows and doorway. Today, number 2628 is home to Chestnut Park Realty, and the rear upper floor of the building, accessible via the doorway from the street marked number 26, is currently for lease, while an interior decorator occupies the upper front office space. The building next door at number 24 is also currently for lease. Built in the 1870s, this residence was an investment property for John Hogg, owner of the Queen Street Mansion, Wyoming. From the mid-1930s to 1988, it was a beauty parlor under 2 different owners, then a flower shop occupied the space in the early 1990s. Tenants thereafter include an esthetician, support and self-help organizations, and most recently, a consignment shop. Past the laneway is number 20, a stone building with a red brick facade. The Mercury Progress Report of 1903 states that, at a cost of $10,000, Robert Lachlan McKinnon had this building constructed to house offices to rent and for his own law practice. The successors of McKinnon's law firm serviced their clients in this same building until 1989, when, having outgrown the space, moved to Woolwich Street. Number 20 was known as the Telephone Building during Bell's occupancy from 1904 to 1915, though they were just tenants, not owner. Bell had grown, and their office in the Brownlow Building was no longer sufficient. In a letter to his supervisor, head office, Bell's office manager of 1903 recommended this move. "If you think we can possibly afford a place at $650 a year, as the location is magnificent, and it would cost us more than that if we stay where we are and take another room in the present building." The proposed location is about the very best in town. By 1911, Bell reached a milestone of having its 1,000th telephone placed in service in Guelph, though until well after the Depression, owning a telephone showed considerable affluence and progressiveness, a status symbol of the time. Other occupants of the building include Guelph's first millionaire, James W. Lyon, who had occupied a building further up the street circa 1880s. Architect William A. Mahoney was an early tenant, and George Drew, former Guelph mayor and Ontario's 14th premier, practiced law inside these offices. The exterior steps leading down to a basement rental unit was for many years another place to get clipped. A barbershop pole was an exterior fixture on number 20 for an approximate time period of 1916 to 1970. For 3 years, this building housed the United States Consulate, which had been operating elsewhere in the city since 1866. The consuls kept logbooks, and in an entry written by Consul Harry Dill, it's reported that the duties at this port, though wholly commercial, are, I think, more arduous than at any other Canadian consulate, owing to the necessity of meeting the shippers of livestock to certify to their invoices, delays and special trains frequently requiring my attendance till a late hour of the night. Figures from the 1884 logbook of Consul Lowton S. Hunt indicate that by dollar value, the top exported goods at that time from Guelph to the United States were livestock and eggs. The consulate office was one of 10 U.S. consulates in Ontario that were recommended to be abolished in 1906. Today, the second floor of this building has been transformed into a large, bright fitness studio where a husband and wife duo offer personal training under the banner of Bars and Bells. Other offices within are leased to lawyers and healthcare professionals in keeping with the historical thread of the building's original occupants. These personal trainers have commented that they enjoy the views and ambiance of the street and are not the only business owners who have mentioned to me the comforting presence of the bells that ring out from the clock tower of St. George's. Not only do the chimes mark the passing of the day, but reassure all who hear them that all is well on Douglas Street. The next building, number 18, is set back from the street, almost hidden by the buildings on either side, and was built in the early 1860s as a dwelling for land agent Andrew M. Jackson, who rented office space in the Brownlow Block building. It has the distinction of being the oldest structure on the street, as an early fire plan indicates an empty lot across the street where the county solicitor's building was built the following year. In the mid-1890s, the prestigious men's group, the Priory Club, used this space as its meeting house. The Priory Club eventually moved around the corner to Woolwich, and for the next 80 years, number 18 became the office space for barristers. Since 2000, it has been a dental office. The half-timbered gables and bay windows were later additions. Number 16 is attached to its neighbor, but with an original construction date of 1892, it was built prior to the red brick structure next door. C.L. Dunbar practiced law here with partner Hugh McMillan before building their establishment up the street at number 3032, which we've already visited. Undertaker Angus McNiven then moved in, followed by Dignan & Sons, also undertakers. The building returned to its law office status in the late 1930s through to 1984. It was then converted to the Blue Danube restaurant, closely followed by the fine dining establishment of George & Creed's. La Luma Salon and Academy is the current tenant, making it the most recent shop on the street offering hairstyling services. On the site of the current Red Brick Café, there was once a small wooden frame structure where in the 1880s J.W. Lyon established the headquarters office for his business, World Publishing Company. By 1896, a new red brick building stood on the property, and the Mercury's progress report of that year reports that Maclean & Maclean have added greatly to the appearance of the business part of the city by the erection of a handsome two-story structure pressed brick with white stone trimmings on Douglas Street, which takes the place of the old building, which was an eyesore to that important section. This building is admirably arranged as a block for offices, for interior fittings, vaults, lighting, etc. being designed with that end in view. It is heated by hot water and lighted with electricity throughout. William and John McLean were barristers, and the quoted cost of construction of their building was $7,000. Around 1910, Albert D. Savage moved into number 8 and there looked after his clients for an approximate 30 years. Savage was a successful optometrist and optician, being the exclusive optical establishment in the district, and lenses were ground right on the premises next door at number 10. The second floor offices had been rented out to a variety of tenants over the years, and the doorway that bears number 10 is a stairwell to those offices. Similarly, the exterior door marked number 12 on the street is the stairwell access to the now bright high-ceilinged apartment that was once office space for a variety of occupants, including Conger Lehigh Coal Company. A Savage Shop sign bearing a pair of eyes hung from the building and watched over the street's activities for decades. When I asked the grandson of A.D. Savage about this iconic sign, he indicated that the family does not know what fate the sign encountered. Savage was a prolific advertiser, and his ads were warnings linking eye health to life's successes. His slogan, "See Savage, see better," was believed by many Guelph citizens. Even Guelph native Edward Johnson, who was living in New York City at the time, had Savage fill his eyeglass prescription. A thank you letter from Johnson indicates a satisfied customer. "The glasses arrived safely and are splendid. I like the color and I like the form, and I am so glad you persuaded me to have the test and to make the change, because I feel sure I'm going to see easier with these new lenses. Thank you 1,000 times, and with all good wishes, I am sincerely yours, Eddie Johnson." After the death of A.D. Savage, Imperial Optical was one of the building's successors, managed by Roy Coburn, father of current Wyndham Street optician Scott Coburn, from 1940 to 1984. Scott took over the business in 1984 and moved into the newly built Eaton Centre. The Red Brick Café, the current occupant of this building, has been in operation for the past 15 years, and renovations to the basement have taken place fairly recently by the current owner. This building shares a common interior feature with 7 other buildings on the street: the walk-in safe. Today, most of these Douglas Street safes are no more than storage, linen, and clothes closets, but vaults and safes were installed in many of these buildings because the threat of fire was a real concern in the street's early days. These buildings, as we have learned, housed lawyers, insurance companies, and accountants, businesses that required protected file storage. J&J Taylor was a Canadian manufacturer of safes, and a number of the Douglas Street safes bear that name. An old advertisement for J&J Taylor boasts that their safes never failed to preserve their contents, even in the hottest fires. As for the current use of these safes, one tenant on the street has commented that the exterior wall walk-in safe in his office is a great place to store beer in the winter. The entrance to Douglas was once announced by the majestic Post Office, Customs, and Inland Revenue Building. Originally a 2-story structure, it was built in 1877 at a cost of approximately $25,000. 1894 saw some building improvements, including a galvanized iron roof, exterior paint job, and new flagpole, and in 1902, the stone building received an addition of a 3rd floor, clock tower, and a turret-style extension at the end of the building towards Douglas Street with a spiral staircase. The clock was installed in 1906, but on October 19, 1960, the clock stopped ticking at 2:35 p.m. as demolition of the building began. For 83 years, this statuesque building was downtown's beauty. It was the subject of many photos and postcards. past Guelph historian Greta Schutt once said that when conducting historical research, the unexpected discoveries are perhaps the most fascinating, and that it's extremely difficult to stay true to the topic at hand. I am in total agreement. It is hard to stay focused when doing historical digging. There are many points of interest that I could have mentioned, but felt that they veered a little off topic. For instance, I could have mentioned that the man connected to the iconic blue jewelry box, Henry Burke, apprenticed under a relative of A.D. Savage. I could have told you that the caretaker of the post office and customs house in 1892 earned a salary of $400 per annum, and that the caretaker during the 1940s offered free music lessons in his third-floor apartment of the building. When the clock announced the time of day, the music had to cease until the clock stopped chiming. I could have gone into detail about the bylaws of the Priory Club, Guelph. A 20-page booklet dated 1908 clearly defines all of the member rules and regulations. Politics and religious questions of every kind were absolutely excluded from open discussions in the club. I could have told you about Scott Coburn's experience with an actor who came to his store and purchased red sunglasses for Jane Fonda. They were in nearby Rockwood, filming the movie Agnes of God. I also could have told you that in days of yore, long before John Galt bought his first axe, that barbers performed more than haircuts and shaves. Amputations, bloodletting, and teeth extractions were all in a day's work. Now that you have viewed the street from both directions and from above, I hope you have gained a new appreciation for a street that I love to stroll. Next time you find yourself on Douglas Street, walk slowly, look around, and think of the people who walked this narrow street years ago. You won't hear the sound of horses' hooves, nor will you find a barber or an undertaker in sight. But the street continues to remind us of a not so distant past.